U.S. Airways 1549.
January 15th, 2009. In New York, it was an ordinary day. At LaGuardia Airport, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 was preparing for takeoff, carrying 155 souls to Charlotte. It was a routine domestic flight commanded by Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, a veteran with 40 years of flight experience, a former F-4 fighter pilot, and a gliding instructor. Beside him, First Officer Jeffrey Skiles. Everything felt normal. However, 208 seconds after the plane's wheels left the tarmac, a moment would be etched into aviation history. An incident involving a double-engine failure and a water landing in freezing cold conditions would normally spell a catastrophe with mass casualties. But Flight 1549 did not end that way. It ended up in the water, in the freezing Hudson River, and inside, one unbelievable fact would stun the world. 0 fatalities. 155 people survived. This wasn't just luck. It was the result of a pilot's experience. A crew's composure and a decision made in less than 4 minutes. This is the story of how Captain Sully turned a dual-engine failure into the miracle on the Hudson. The plane had just reached an altitude of roughly 2,800 feet. Beneath them, the dense sprawl of the Bronx. Suddenly, without warning, in that crisp winter air, a heavy jolt and a series of explosions tore through both sides of the aircraft. U.S. Airways 1549 had slammed into a large flock of Canada geese, huge, heavy birds that were instantly ingested into both CFM-56 engines. Instantly, the cockpit filled with the smell of smoke. And more terrifyingly, silence. Warning alarms blared, but the roar of both engines had vanished. The engine indicators showed 0. They were facing a dual-engine failure at dangerously low altitude. Captain Sully immediately took control. There was no time for panic. First Officer Skiles grabbed the checklist for an engine relight, a procedure designed for cruise altitude not over New York City. Sully knew. Time was not their friend. They were rapidly losing speed and thrust, now gliding toward the ground. At 3:27:32 p.m., Sully broke the silence with a chillingly calm radio message to Air Traffic Control, ATC.
Cactus 1539 hit birds, so you've lost thrust on both engines returning back towards LaGuardia.
The moment Captain Sully declared an emergency, Air Traffic Controller Patrick Harton moved fast. Harton quickly offered the only viable rescue options, a sharp turn back to LaGuardia or a hard right to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. But this was an unavoidable race against gravity and time. Captain Sully had no seconds to spare for deliberation. As a former glider pilot and a seasoned safety investigator, his mind instantly jumped to flight mathematics. He calculated their descent rate, their weight, and the precise angle needed to make the runway.
We can't do it.
Sully had made his choice. He knew that attempting to turn the heavy Airbus A320, now gliding at its optimal green dot speed, toward any runway would require a sharp banking maneuver. That turn would bleed off precious altitude. If they failed to reach the tarmac, they would crash directly into densely populated buildings and neighborhoods. The broad Hudson River was the only runway long enough, flat enough, and, crucially, unpopulated, lying directly ahead. His decision ultimately was a choice between minor risk, freezing water, and mass catastrophe, crashing into the city. This is the strongest evidence for Sully's decision. In the post-crash NTSB investigation, they ran repeated simulator tests, attempting to prove a pilot could return to an airport. Initially, the tests succeeded, but one crucial element was missing. The NTSB then added a 35-second delay, the minimum time required for a real-world pilot to recognize the dual-engine failure, diagnose the situation, and decide on a course of action. With that 35-second delay incorporated, not a single pilot in the simulator run succeeded in reaching Teterboro or LaGuardia. Sully's decision wasn't luck. It was instinct honed over 40 years, crystallized in 35 critical seconds. They were 900 feet above the Hudson, and the clock was ticking down to impact. With the decision made, Captain Sully had precious seconds to configure the Airbus A320, a feat never meant to be performed in the real world. He had to hit the water at the right speed, the right attitude, and the right angle of attack to keep the fuselage intact. He achieved a flawless landing by using the aircraft's fly-by-wire system, designed to prevent pilots from making dangerously sharp turns. To his advantage, he flew the plane until the very last moment, shouting the 2 most critical words in aviation. In the cabin, flight attendants Sheila Dale, Donna Dent, and Doreen Welsh acted with incredible composure. They shouted the "heads down," "stay down," command just moments before the final impact, ensuring passengers were in the correct brace position. At 3:31 p.m., U.S. Airways 1549 struck the surface of the Hudson River. The landing was violent but controlled, decelerating from 150 miles per hour to 0 in an instant. The impact was survivable largely because the A320 had extended over water certification, meaning it carried extra life vests and inflatable slides that doubled as rafts. The moment the plane stopped, the water began flooding the cabin through the damaged tail section. The 3 flight attendants immediately initiated the emergency evacuation. Their precise execution, from directing passengers to the overwing exits to ensuring the slide rafts were deployed, was the second miracle of the day. With the temperature hovering near freezing, the survival clock had already begun ticking, not in minutes, but in seconds. The next challenge wasn't landing the plane. It was getting 155 people out of the freezing water alive. With the air temperature at 20 degrees Fahrenheit and the water at a deadly 36 degrees, the first miracle was over and the clock for the second had started. Exposure to that water could kill a person in under 30 minutes. Every second counted. This is where the NY waterway ferries became the unsung heroes. Within minutes of the crash, ferry captains who witnessed the ditching, like Captain Vincent Lombardi and Captain Mohammed Gouda, immediately diverted their massive commuter boats toward the crippled Airbus. The ferry crews, using ladders, ropes, and even a Jason's cradle, a specialized rescue device, began pulling passengers from the freezing water and off the sinking wings. Their speed and proximity turned a probable mass tragedy into a successful mass rescue. While the passengers were being transferred, Captain Sully took on his final essential duty, ensuring his flight was empty. He walked the length of the aisle twice, inspecting every seat, every row, even the luggage bins, ensuring no one was left behind. Only when he was absolutely certain did Captain Sully step out onto the wing, the last person to evacuate the plane. As he was pulled aboard the ferry, looking back at his sinking aircraft, the miracle on the Hudson was complete. 155 souls accounted for. But the story didn't end on the ferry deck. The investigation that followed would scrutinize every single action, decision, and training protocol, ultimately changing aviation safety forever. The investigation that followed Flight 1549 became as famous as the crash itself. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, meticulously examined the wreckage and the crew's actions. The result was not a condemnation, but a vindication of Captain Sully's split-second decision. The NTSB confirmed that Sully's choice to ditch in the Hudson was the most viable option. They ruled that the simulator tests, which initially suggested a return to the airport was possible, were flawed because they did not account for the 35-second human reaction delay required in a real-world crisis. The incident led to 34 NTSB safety recommendations, impacting the entire industry. These recommendations demanded better dual-engine failure checklists, better training for ditching, and better bird strike protection standards. Furthermore, First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, who worked tirelessly on the checklist in the final minutes, became a powerful voice in Washington. His advocacy directly contributed to the passage of the Airline Safety Act of 2010, which mandated greater flight hour experience for first officers. The miracle on the Hudson is not just a tale of survival. It's a story about preparedness and experience. It proved that years of specialized training, from Sully's gliding experience to the cabin crew's emergency drills, can overcome an impossible scenario. The aircraft, Airbus A320, now rests in the Carolinas Aviation Museum, a silent monument to that cold January day. And every time a plane takes off from LaGuardia, the event serves as a reminder. Sometimes, in the face of impossible odds, human skill, composure, and community are the factors that truly save the day. But what do you think? Would you have had the courage to choose the water? Let me know in the comments below.